Hello and welcome. I'm so glad you came. In spite of the rain, there was no rain delay. The game will go on. And we don't always do this, but I want you to all give a big round of applause to our projectionists tonight who had to work really hard to get the show on the road. Let's see. My name's Jenny Paxson. I work here in the administrative section. And most of the work I have to do has to do with the theater. I do the flyers and the slideshows, which usually show before the screenings, at least they used to. And we've been telling you all that they would start again in June, but just found out on Thursday that things still aren't ready with the digital projector. So I was really sorry to hear that because I had already done 2 slideshows, one for Jackie Robinson and one for tonight. But you can go home and go to Facebook, a fan of the Packard Campus Theater, and it's posted there. You have to scroll through it yourself. But anyways, that made the introduction a little easier because I can just tell you things that were in the slideshow, and you can imagine the pictures. Anyways, we usually start by saying the rules that please don't talk during the movie so everybody can hear the actors instead of the person sitting near them. And please turn off your cell phones. Don't look at it for text or have the lights show for any reason. And usually we say no food or drink in the theater, and that still is pretty much true except for those little bottles of water that's out by the water fountain. We're currently having some challenges with our water wells and ask that you not drink the water from the water fountains or taps in the buildings.
You might want to tell the guard because she wouldn't.
Yeah, we talked about that. They didn't know. They didn't read the sign.
Okay.
But you can bring those bottles in. Just keep the cap on them. And there's a box for recycling by the water fountain as you go out. And but no other food or other drink in the theater. And I think that's all the rules. So we talk about tonight's movie. You'll notice that, you probably noticed that most of the movies in June are baseball movies, and that's both because there's a lot of good baseball movies out there, and also because there is an exhibit that's going to open in the Jefferson Building at the Library of Congress on June 29th called Baseball Americana. And so this is to tie in with that. And you can find out more about that exhibit at loc.gov. Tonight's film, 8 Men Out, was released on September 2nd, 1988. And it's about one of the most infamous scandals in baseball's history, and that's when the Chicago White Sox accepted bribes to deliberately lose the 1919 World Series against the Cincinnati Reds. It's hard to imagine now, but in those days, Major League ball players didn't make the enormous salaries they do now. They made very little money, and in fact, they were more or less indentured help to the team owners. And as the movie tells it, few teams were run as poorly as the Chicago White Sox owner Charles Kaminsky, which is why professional gamblers figured they could easily bribe the team, or at least some of them, to throw the series. It was written and directed by John Sayles and based on Elliot Asanoff's 1963 book, 8 Men Out, The Black Sox and the 1919 World Series. Asanoff had been a minor league first baseman in 1940 and wrote several books about baseball and stories, both fiction and nonfiction, but this was his most famous. John Sayles, the director, had started out as an actor and then screenwriter for low-budget producer Roger Corman. His first film as a director was the indie The Return of the Secaucus 7 in 1980. Some people say that inspired The Big Chill because it was about a group of college friends that got together later. It was made with a very low budget of just $60,000. You can buy a car for that. But it's so well thought of that it's on the National Film Registry. It was added in 1997. And Sayles has been nominated for Best Original Screenplay Oscar for Passion Fish in 92 and Lone Star in 96, both of which he also directed. But my favorite of his movies is The Secret of Roan Inish, and we played that here in 2014, and it's a wonderful family film set in Ireland about seals. Look for it, it's really good. Beautiful music, too. He had wanted to make a film based on Asanoff's book for years. He wrote a screenplay in 1977, 11 years before it finally got made. But he had trouble getting it financed. Different people would try to buy the rights. They would buy the rights, and then it wouldn't get made. And Sales said in an interview that he was told, "You'll never get this made. There's a curse on it. People have been trying to make it for years." And when he talked about his thoughts for the cast and what he imagined when he first wrote the screenplay and what he ended up with, he said, "My original dream team had Martin Sheen at third base. I ended up with his son Charlie in center field." But he had an impressive cast once it finally got made, and it included several up-and-comers, including Charlie Sheen, who may have been the best known among them, because at that point, he was not known for his anger management problems, but he had already appeared in Platoon and Oliver Stone's Wall Street in a leading role. And he has a fairly small part in this, because it's an ensemble piece. But Sheen said, "I'm not in this for the cash or my career or my performance. I wanted to take part in this film because I love baseball, and it would be the only way I could get to play in the World Series." Other team members you'll recognize in the film are John Cusack, who I remember most for Arthur Valley. And he was born and raised in Chicago. He's a fan of the Chicago Cubs and the Chicago White Sox, which makes him unpopular with some of his friends. David Strathairn, who is a former college classmate of John Sayles. He's appeared in most of Sayles' films. Strathairn won an Oscar in 2006 for his portrayal of journalist Edward R. Murrow in Good Night and Good Luck, and also D.B. Sweeney as Shoeless Joe Jackson. Sweeney had actually started out to be a baseball player before an accident curtailed his sports career, and so he turned to acting. But he had to train for the film. He actually went on the road with a minor league team at his own expense before making this film. And he said he actually lost money on the deal because he was paid scale for the role, but he paid his own expenses for months. But it was worth it because he turned in a good job, and he actually had to learn to switch from right-handed to left-handed batting to be Shoeless Joe. John Mahoney plays the coach. You'll recognize him from Frasier, as Frasier's father. Christopher Lloyd from Taxi and the Back to the Future movies is one of the gamblers. And John Sayles himself plays the role of Chicago sports writer Ring Lardner. Sayles said in an interview, too, he originally imagined himself to be one of the players when he first wrote it, but he was too old by the time it came out. But it turned out really well because the role of Lardner he does very well, and he looks a lot like him. And I was going to show you that in the slideshow. I had a picture of the two of them together. Look at it for it when you go home. Pulitzer Prize-winning author Studs Terkel, who spent most of his life in Chicago, appears in his only acting role as fellow sports writer Hugh Fullerton. Even though the film's about Chicago, it was filmed in Busch Stadium in Indianapolis, which I guess was easier to, it was older, it was easier to make it look from the time period. One-time White Sox outfielder Ken Berry was brought in to train the cast to become better ball players. And I'm happy to report that, you always see these ball players with big wads of chewing tobacco in their jaw. Well, one of the cast actors, Bill Irwin, said that some of the actors chewed tobacco at first, but even the guys who were really into it started to chew apricots after a while. Several people involved in the film would go on to work in Ken Burns' 1994 miniseries Baseball. John Cusack, Christopher Lloyd, and D.B. Sweeney did voiceovers, recording some of the memories of various personalities connected with the game, while John Sayles and Studs Terkel were interviewed about the 1919 World Series. And Terkel also reprised his role by reading Hugh Fullerton's columns during the section on the Black Sox. I hope you'll come back next Saturday when we're playing Field of Dreams, when the spirit of the 1919 Chicago White Sox will make an appearance. With that, enjoy the film, and if you want to learn more about it, look for Elliot Asnoff's book.